Hey everyone, today we'll be working with React Native and more specifically we will be working with Redux thunk, which is a way to handle asynchronous calls to, for example, an HTTP endpoint. So before, in one of our previous videos, you can take a look at here, we were doing kind of synchronous calls to our to change our Redux store. So we were dispatching an action, for example, to show a snack bar. We would say, okay, here's a message, and then of course in the app we will listen for that change on the store, and we would just show the message. But now we have some asynchronous call here. So we will call an endpoint, and that endpoint will take some time to respond. So we will have Redux thunk to help us there, and basically how it works is we have three actions. One is when we dispatch the asynchronous call, where we will say that we have a pending action, so to say, where we can, for example, say, okay, now we are loading something and show a spinner. Then we will have automatically, then we will dispatch also a fulfilled action. So where we say, okay, here it is, we got some results from the HTTP call. Now we can update our Redux store. And of course, you can listen to it in the app, in your screen, and also show the results. And you have the third one, which is the rejected action. So basically, where you get errors from the HTTP call, you will want also to show, okay, something went wrong, for example. But we will use Redux thunk to help us there. And before we had a separate module, now we have Redux thunk inside Redux toolkit, which is also really nice because they added some nice features. We have this way of doing it, so we dispatch actions and we update the state on the Redux store, but there is also a way to just get the results from the first dispatched action and also get the error. So you can use it both ways, and it's really nice because in sometimes you don't need the full flow of Redux store changes. You just want to get the results, so you can also use that depending on your use case for your screens. So yeah, take a look at next. Okay, so let's go. We will be using the Ricky and Morty API, which is a free API that we will be using just to get an image and also a name, so that we can render a list, a flat list in our React Native app, and do some asynchronous call, HTTP call in this case. So let's start. For now, we have an empty app, and I just want to add here a flat list. So for that one, we will need to provide a data field, a data prop, and we can say we will pass the characters, which we will get from the API. So somewhere here, I will have some characters that will come from the store, so use selector, something like that. But yeah, we will have these one, and it will be an array. And then we can also do render item, where we will pass get item function. And for now we are good, so yeah, that's fine for now. So let's do const get item, or even better, let's do get character, and here I will pass some character, which will have yeah, we will create an interface for it, and we will return an object, so basically a list item, right, from the of the flat list. So here I will create a view, and this one will be easy, so will be simple. So an image and also some text. So yeah, that's it. So in the text, I know that this will be character dot something, and then the image, we will have a source where we pass URI, which will be also character dot, I think URI probably, or URL, let's see after. And now we should be good. So let's see. So here it's character name, and here it's character image, and that's it. So for the key we will use character dot id. So that's it. Let's import this one, update, and this one will be get character. Okay, let me style this view here. So we will get some styles here, and we will do styles.character, and here we can create our character style, and here we will say flex 1. We will say that we want the flex direction as a raw, because we want the image and then the text. So let's do raw. And then I was also justify content space between, and I think we should be good for now. Okay, and that will apply to each of the characters. This one we will get from the store, the Redux store, and this one we will also create later. So the character, which will only have an ID, a name, and an image, so it should be pretty simple. Okay, so now I want to create a folder. Typical, the one is app, where we put everything related with React. And inside the Redux folder, I want to create the store.ts. And here I will just grab some code, which is, first of all, this one is to introduce Redux Flipper, which is a dependency which we need to connect to Flipper, which is an application we will be using to see the state of the Redux store. I will get into it later. And then, so here we are configuring our store and just passing the middlewares. And yeah, we now need to install some stuff. So let's install Redux toolkit and also Redux. So let me do Redux.js toolkit. Then we need to install Redux itself and also this Redux Flipper, and we should be good to go. So now I can say Redux, and after Redux, Redux Flipper, so that we can use it after. And that's it pretty much. So now, as you see, there are no errors anymore. This is also something that we got from previous exercises we did, and this one is only to inject middleware into the store. This middleware will get the default middleware that they have. So for example, in this video we will be using the default Redux thunk that is already inside Redux JS toolkit, but we also wanted to inject this one middleware, so we just imported here if we are on dev environment. So if you are in production, yeah, you don't need to get this one enabled. Yeah, we just concat the middlewares to the default ones, and then we have our Redux Flipper middleware there. So this character here, this is the slice, so we will create it a little bit after. So now I will also create the common. Oops. I will also create some more code. And by the way, here I install Redux, but I don't want this one. I want to uninstall this one and install the React Redux. So so now install save React Redux. That's the one we need, which we are also using here. So these are also from previous projects, so we just copy pasted them here. So here I want to create our character slice. We create slice, yes, and then here I will pass an object with a name, which will be the character slice, and we will export the default, which will be the character.reducer. Create here some initial state, which we will say initial state. Reducers for now, since we will be using Redux thunk, we will use not any reducer here, but we will say extra reducers. So we will use it for integration with a Redux async thunk. And here I can const initial state, which will be a character state, which we will create here. Export an interface called, well, actually we don't need to export it, so we will use it inside. In here we will have characters, which will be a character array. Then we will have an error, which for now will be undefined, and we will also have a loading or something, which we can say boolean. This is typically what we do when we use asynchronous calls. So the character one I can create here. So let's do create this one. We will export it, interface, then character, and here I can say the name. The name will be a string. Then there's an ID, which will be a number, and there's also an image, which will be a string. Okay, this is something that we will get from the asynchronous call, the HTTP call, and we will get a bunch of characters, and these are there are more things returned on the call, but for now and for the example we just want to have some, so ID, name, and image should do the trick. So now on the initial state, I can create these, right? So I can say characters will be empty because there's nothing in the beginning. The error will be undefined and the loading will be false. We are not loading anything in the initial state, so we should be good here. The extra reducers we will create them after, and we need the error. And the error I can also create it after when I do the asynchronous call. So now I want to come here to the Redux one, and I will call it thunk, so that you, of course, you can divide these as, for example, a character folder where you put everything related to character there. Now I'm just putting like app Redux thunk so that you know where is what. So now I have fetch character, which will be our async thunk, basically, for fetching the character. Okay, so for this one I will create a characters base URL. I have it here. So this is the API that we will connect to. This is a free API, so there's no credentials, anything like that, so you can just use it. And I will use the character API. Of course, you can go to the website I showed you and see what they return on this API endpoint, what is the JSON, and you will see there the name, the ID, and also the image. And pretty much that's it. So we will be using that, and I hard coded here. Of course, in a real app, you would have these endpoints in a configuration file somewhere, so that you don't need to repeat every time the same const. But yeah, for the sake of this exercise. So now I want to create a fetch character here. And this one will create a sync thunk. Oops, not this one. Create a sync thunk. The create a sync thunk accepts here a lot of stuff. So the return value and a couple of types for the different returns that we need to do. And here I can say that they receive a parameter, which will be the characters, and then fetch characters. So this parameter will be used to create the actions, and the actions that will be created will be something like characters, fetch characters, loading, characters, fetch characters, fulfilled, characters, fetch characters, rejected, or something like that. So yeah, that's the name that you need to create for all your create async thunks, and then they will append, because they will create the different actions, the 3 actions that they create based on this name. So then here you need to pass an asynchronous function, which will receive nothing as an argument. So if you have, for example, arguments that you need to pass to your endpoint, like pagination or like any parameter, query parameter, then you need to use this part here, but you don't need it. We don't need it here, but we will receive also a thunk API, and that will be used after in our call. So now for these ones, we want first to say that the results, which is something that we receive on the API, will be a character array. Okay, so we can import that, and this is the return, and it's with curly braces here, like this. Okay, so this will be the returned, as you see here. Then we have the thunk arg. The thunk arg is the one we receive here, but we don't have anything, so I can just say void. And then we have the async thunk config, which will be also an object. Here we will have the reject value, which for now will be undefined, but we want to reject with an exception, right? So we will create exceptions when there's an error on the API, and we will throw it here. So we will pass it as a reject value to the promise. And there's also a fulfilled meta, which will be void for now, and also rejected meta, which will be void. I will explain all of these fields a little bit after. So now we can actually, so recap, this one will be we will resolve the promise with these, the characters array, which come from the HTTP call. So this is the first argument here. Then we have the void, which is this one. We don't need this parameter because we are not passing anything to the endpoint, so we pass void. And then there's these options here, which we say the reject value will be undefined for now, but we will add the exceptions that we'll be throwing when we get, for example, a 500 or 400 or whatever. And then there is a fulfilled meta and the rejected method, because when you use the thunk API to reject or accept or to resolve a value, then they also provide the meta field, and that meta field we will not be using, so we can just say void, and that's it. Okay, so now we will fetch we will call the endpoint. So we will await fetch, and we will pass the characters base URL, and then there's also some parameters that we want to pass, like the get, and then also the headers, which will be accept, let's say application JSON, and also content type, which will be also application JSON. And here we are. So now we can just do this. If response.ok and response.status equal 200, because I know that it's a 200 in case of success. Now we have the happy flow, so the const response or result will be of type, as you know, results, just to be explicit, character array. And then this one will be await response.json. So the JSON that we return will be in this format. So they return results, and then the result is an array of characters. So this should be good. And this one is the happy flow. Oops, flow. Okay, cool. Then here Now here we can return, and here we will use the thunk API to say fulfill with value, and then we pass the result. So pretty much that's it. So we fulfill this query. So this endpoint call with this result after we get it from the endpoint. So the promise that we return on the create async thunk will be resolved with this result, and then yeah, we just pass it here. And of course, as you see, there's this meta here, but I don't need to pass it because we will not use it. So for now, we keep it simple, no meta, void, so just pass the result. So now here on the else, I know that I will receive the HTTP errors, right? So I will say like 400s and 500s will fall in this category. So here I can also say const result await response.json, assuming that your API, assuming that their API basically, because, but yeah, we can think about this one as our API, assuming that we have here a front-end, back-end contract, right? Where we know that all 400s errors and 500s will return response JSON, and there will be something that we pass back to our clients. So in this case, our app. And maybe here we can say error. And here I will also say that we get an API error, which will be a new HTTP API error. We will create this, and I know from not from these API, I don't care about this anymore, but let's imagine that this one is our API and that we know that there is an error, and inside error we will get an error code, for example. So we can create that, and imagine that we also return a message. So that we can think about when we do our backends, right? And here we return the thunk API, and instead of fulfill, we just reject with value, and we pass the API error. So the reject value, now we can say that we also pass get HTTP API error, which we will create after. Here we can say API.ts, and I will say export class HTTP API error, extends error. So for free we get message, right? But we need to create error code. This one we can say number. Then we get a constructor where I want to provide the error code, which is a number, and also the message, which will be a string. And here I want to say super, because error contains there's a name also there, and also a message. So I want here to the super, I will pass the message, and then the these error code will be equal to the error code. Okay, so now we have an exception or an error where we have an error code there and also a message. Of course, you can create in your backends more fields, right? You could pass whatever you want, right? A message, or you can pass an error code as a number or an error code as a string that you define yourself, and that's basically the contract between frontends and backends. So your backend should document that clearly so that also the clients can align with the backend and yeah, do the error handling. So now if I return back here, I can just import it and continue. So I want to try catch these because of course, you can also get other errors, right? So for example, if I cannot connect to the API. So in this case, fetch will return an error here. And here we will say, we will check if error is instance of type error, because all network related stuff like timeouts and all of that, will be under the type error. So fetch will throw these type error. And here I would say like const create error equal new network error. And I would say return thunk API dot reject error. And that will be also a network error, which we need to create. And probably here, let's make it E. And that's it. And let's create this one. So here I can just export another class. Of course, maybe you want to export in different in a different file, but for now, let's just create it here. So I want to just do this. That's fine. We get the message. And in here, I also want to create a name. So there's this name property, and typically we do it like this. I will use that name for when we put it in the store, we can distinguish between errors. So now I will create our constructor here where I pass a message if I want as a string, and then I create this name, this name equal to network error. And we also do super message. If there's a message, we will use it, and that's it. So on the fetch character, I can do import it and reject the error. And of course, now we are saying that there's an error because you cannot, you need to add it here on the type. Now we don't have the errors. So these would fall on the network errors. Of course, for these, it depends. Like if you use fetch, you need to understand what does fetch return when there's a network error, and what does Axios, for example, return. Yeah, you need to dive into it and do your proper error handling here. But these one, for example, will just create a network error every time there's a network error, but maybe you want to also specify which one, and for which one you want also to handle it differently. Otherwise, you can just make a generic generic error. But yeah, so basically here now I will do the generic one. So I will do const error equal new generic error. And here I will not pass anything. I will just do return and then thunk API reject with value and pass the error. And again, we need to create a generic error. So let's copy paste this one. Pretty similar. Generic error, and here generic error. Okay, so we have our errors. And here we can also import the generic error. And of course, here we need to do generic error. And that's pretty much it. And get rid of this one. So now we have here everything else. Cool. So we have this is done. So now we need to go back to Redux store. So when we fetch, we will dispatch an action which will be created by create async thunk automatically. We will dispatch that on the app. Then we will end up firing here the endpoint call. Then we will get into these results and we will fulfill or reject. And after we will get back to the Redux store again. And depending on the returns and the action that it returns, so the fulfill action, the rejected action, or the loading action, then we will update our state. And with that, we can also update our app. So we can get back to the Redux store and more specifically to the slice. And here I want to inject a builder so they will inject the builder basically, and we can create builder.addCase, and here we can say fetch character dot, and then we can see the pending, not loading, pending. Then we have fulfilled, and we have also rejected. So let's do for the fulfilled action. They will create the action automatically. So we will now listen for that and apply that. So here I will pass, we will receive also the state and also the action. And then we can do our updates on the state. So here we can, just for debugging purposes, we can say fulfilled, and then we will say state.characters equal to state.characters, so the ones that were there, plus the action dot, you see here meta, so you can pass that, but we will use the payload dot results. So then state will be changed, and actually here it's also like this. So we want also to spread results because it can be more than one. And here we are good. So then we will build maybe builder dot add case and then fetch character dot pending. This is when we fire the dispatch action to fetch basically, and we will have an action which we'll not use for now, but this one could say like state dot, now our loading could be true, because we know that this one is when we fetch, so we are loading now. And we can also do when we receive the the fulfilled, it's because we already have stuff, so we already received characters, so we can put the loading to false. So our state on the Redux will be loading false. So I can also add another one, which will be the rejected. And here we will say loading also to false because we rejected. There's no loading in taking place. And we have the state dot error equal to action dot payload also. And there you see we have the message, the name, and the stack. So now, but I want to understand, I want to create an error object here. And first I want to understand the fields that we have in the error. So we have first an error code somewhere. Let me see. So, oh, we didn't create it yet. Okay, cool. So now it's the time to create our error. What will be the error? So for that, I will create here under Redux. I will create a file which will be the redux.ts, and here I will export an interface which will be like Redux API error, and this interface will have an error code, or it can happen that it has an error code, and then it will have a message which can also be not there, so string, and then we will have a type which will be there, and we are good. So now I can go back to character slice and say if the error, so here we know now the state error needs to be of a Redux API error or undefined, so we can say that the error is also optional. We can say if the action payload is instance of HTTP API error, there's an error code there, right? So let's say error code, then we do this. So if it is instance of the API error, then we say action dot, oh, come on. We say action dot payload dot error code, otherwise undefined. Then we can also have a message, yes, so action That one will be just action payload dot message, because every exception that we throw as a message. And then we have the type, which we will say that is the action dot payload dot name, which is the name we created for all of them. And the type needs to be there, so these will be payload. It's possibly undefined, not for this case, right? Let's see, fetch character. What did we create? We have generic error, API error, not undefined. Well, technically, probably you can, but I can not do this, for example, right? So why do they say? Well, technically, this one says that HTTP API error, network error, generic error, and undefined. So I thought, but here we just have 3 of them on the reject value. So I thought this one shouldn't be like this, but these could be just but apparently these reject with value will also possibly be undefined or something like that. And so they are mentioning that payload is also possible to be undefined, even though I don't get it, because this action says undefined there, of course, like HTTP API error, network error, generic error, or undefined. But on the fetch character, we just have HTTP API error, network error, or generic error. So I don't get it why we have like something like this here. Because even if I try to throw a reject value of undefined here, I get this error, right? It's not assignable to parameter of type HTTP API error, network error. So I don't get it. Why? Maybe you guys can find out, but for now I will proceed. So I will create this type also an optional one. So we should be good now. So yeah, now we can create the state with the type with name, and the state loading will be false. And we only have error codes if indeed we have an HTTP API error. So then we know that the payload will contain an error code, otherwise we don't have an error code. So here we should be good. And I can just say console log and then rejected. And here we can say console log loading. Cool. So now if we get back to the app here, I can say use app selector. Then we will say select characters, which we will need to do. So let's go to not fetch character. Now I want to do export const select characters, and I will receive a root state here, and we can just say state.character.characters. We can also create 2 more. So one is select characters error, which we can say character.error, and then maybe in the middle select characters loading, and here we will say loading. So now we have our selectors, and we can go to the app, select characters, and import it. Okay, cool. So we pass the select characters, so we should get the characters. Here we can import, and the render item we pass the get character. So here let's fix that part. So we receive some item to render the list, right? And we need to return the get character, and we pass the item dot item. We can call it maybe data, and then here data item. And we can say like this, and this one should go away. Okay, so now we should get a character here, and we should see that. But now we also need to dispatch, right? So let's do a use effect. So here I want dispatch, const dispatch, use app dispatch, and then we can say dispatch fetch character, and we should be good. Okay, so let's see. If I restart now, because we did a couple of things, if I restart now, I get the React Redux context value. Yeah, of course. So now the app, we need to inject the store, right? So if I go here into the app, the index, we can just, as on the other videos, we also created our provider. And oops, here provider, and here we are injecting the app, so we should be good here. And here we should call the app wrapper, and we need also to inject the store. So store, let's see if we can, oops, if we can get it. Nope. So let me see. If I go to store, we are exporting this one. So here on the index, can I get it? Nope. I think I can't. So let's do import store from, and then we know that it is inside app Redux, I think, and then store. Okay, cool. So now we get a lot of things. We have here the items. We are getting something. Let's try to fix this. So if I go here to the app, there is a character. I will just console log what we are receiving here. So character. Then I go to Flipper, and I take a look into the logs. So if I go down into the logs, now we see stuff. So we have the name, location, image. So the image is correct. And then the name also, and the ID. So it seems that we don't have multiple, the same IDs every time. So it should be good. But here, let me style the image. So styles dot image, and here let's create image, and I will say like width 64, height 64. Okay, let me reload. Cool, so now we get an image. Let me go back. So I want also, for the character part, I want to give some margins, let's say 16, and a padding of 8, for example. And also for the text itself, let's make styles dot text in this case. And here I will say text, and then text line left. So now we have something a little bit better, I would say. But this one, yeah, we created a space between, right? There's no reason for that in this case, so let's get rid of these, and also the space between, and maybe the margins was too much, so let's add 8 or so. Okay, now I think it's a little bit better. Maybe we could leave also without margins, but yeah, it doesn't matter now, it's just to show something. So if I reload, now I want to get rid of the console log of the character. Then we have styles text, which we don't use anymore, so let's remove that part. And now we should, let me kill this one, run start. Okay, press reload, reload app. Okay, here there are encountered 2 children with the same ID or the same key. So probably the returns of these lists, so the items that we have here, they have the same key for some reason. I'm using the ID, which I think it's not a key. So character ID, so the ID is this one, ID 13, and I would say that they don't provide the same ID every time. But maybe, yeah, they reuse the elements and just return with the same ID. I'm not sure, but that doesn't matter also. So, okay, so yeah, we have the list, and we should be good, but we are getting here, yeah, encountered 2 children with, yeah, let's remove that. I don't like that part because we are having a lot of errors. So we are passing the key, and what I can do is just use npm install uuid or something like that, and just create a uuid here instead of the ID. So we remove this part, and we will import UID or v4, I think it's something like that, and then UUID. Okay, so okay, we also need to install the types, that's fine. And here we can also maybe get, no. So now I install the types and declared but never used. Okay, so now I can just do this, I think. Cannot find name. Okay, maybe, oh, v4, no, v4, let's do as uuid, and here I will uuid. Okay, this one, they are not exporting this, it's something like this. Okay, let me see. UID npm, what are they exporting? Oh, it's the other way around. So it's v4 as uuid v4. Cool. So uuid v4. That's it. So now if I go back and if I reload, then we should have one. Oh yeah, that's always this error also. So we need to fix this one by going to this get random values not supported. There's something that we need to do. We need to install React Native get random values. So npm install, save, and then we need to do this import. We need to do this import. Let's do it on the app, which is our first screen, so to say, and let's reload. And now probably I also need to restart on the iOS part and probably also on the Android. So desktop npm run Android. Okay, so I found out another problem. So let's do, we forgot to install React Native Flipper. We need to go to iOS and let's do pod install. So, and yeah, then we should be good, I think. Yeah, now it's React Native, the get random value is getting there in the React Native Flipper also. So that we need. And then we get here, we also are getting now the, since we swap the keys to the get random UUI, the UUID, then we get the correct keys because they are unique. So now I can go back again, run iOS. I should see the same on iOS. So yeah, as you see, we have here the list. So we got this from the endpoints, the HTTP endpoint. And we can see the image, the text, and that's it pretty much for now. I want to see it also on iOS, and then I want to give an explanation of the full process. And also, I want to show you an interesting thing, which is we can also use Redux, create async Redux thunk without going through the state, so the Redux state. But let's see it after. Okay, cool. So now we can see on both iOS and Android the list. And here, yeah, the only thing we did differently was to use the UUID v4 so that we create a random key every time we render a character so that there is no problem with the keys. It seems that from the API they repeat IDs, so there's some repetition there, so then we were getting the error. So let's just do a deep dive in here. So first, what we are doing is we load the list and we get the data from the store, the Redux store. And before also we add here without this, so then it was running every time, and now we just want to run the dispatch fetch character on the first load of the component, right? So we dispatch the action, and that action will go and trigger this one. So this fetch character will be our create async thunk. It will dispatch this fetch call. Then we will go through the app flow. So now we are seeing the 200, which is the return of the API. And then we say, okay, the results are a character array. And we get that from the JSON and we fulfill the promise. So basically, we get the results of the characters there. And then we also have, for the errors part, we do also HTTP API error, which you could, yeah, align with your backend and see what you are returning. And then, of course, consuming these on the API, on the app side, sorry, so that you can say, for example, show this error if there's this error, show that message if there's another one, etc. So after, what we do is we catch all other errors pretty much. So the network ones, taking in consideration fetch, we just reject with the network error. You could say like, okay, if there's a network error, just show some pop-up where you say, okay, you are out of internet, check your connection or something like that. And then we also have the generic one, which is, yeah, if anything else happens, then just throw this generic error. After we throw this, basically we get for free is the state on the character. So here, basically, we get this for free. So the fetch character fulfilled will be dispatched when you fulfill the promise on fetch character. So then you can get it, the characters from the action results, and then the loading would be false. Of course, you can do the pending one, which if you wanted to, for example, show some spinner when you are calling the API. So then you could say, okay, now I check the loading field and I will put some loading state, some load spinner, and you should be good. And of course, you can also do the reject part where we are just setting an error on the Redux store, and that error will be consumed by your app. So for example, you could say like, okay, if the error code is 1000, then do something and show the message, for example, or something like that. Of course, this would be also something that you need to align with your backend and see, okay, what are we returning on the backend? What are the error codes? What do we need to do on our app? And then, of course, these would change a bit. And you have the selectors to select the characters, the loading, and the errors, so that you can also do something on the app itself. But there's a nice thing here that I want to show. So before, the Redux thunk would be like that. So you would have these 3 actions pretty much, and you would update your state on the Redux store, and also and you were done. So then you would listen for the state on the app side, on the screens, for example, and do whatever you need to do. But now, so here there's a nice thing that we can also do, which is use the unwrap function. And that will unwrap the promise that the fetch character will return. So actually, you don't need to go through the state. And then here I can get some result. And I will say then, and then let's say console log result. Then we can also do a catch, of course, and catch the error, right? And do console log catch, and then also do console log error. So let's see how that works. So we have, okay, this one is of type characters array. Let's fix that part. Yes, that's fixed. Okay, so let's take a look and see how that happens. So the unwrap one will get you the promise fulfilled or rejected, and will get you the result or the error. So then you could just use these to get everything instead of going through the whole flow of the changes on the Redux store. So let me restart here. Now I can see that we get also, okay, this is a bit big, but I can see that we have also the then, and in the then you get the result. So you also have results inside. So everything is there. So in theory, or also in practice, you can use these to get the result directly here. So if you want to use the Redux store, then you can. And of course, there's an action that will be called and fulfilled, or rejected action exactly. And then you can change your state, and then you can get the state from the Redux store in your component or app and show it as we did. But you can also do these. So you can dispatch the action to get it, and then get the result and get the errors. So for example, to get the errors, let me go to the code where we fetch, and just say, for example, here we could return thunk API reject with value, because I know that we will get the 200. So I will just create a generic error, for example, here with a random message, and just comment out these. So now we should see, so now we should see the same, but now I can see that we get into the catch, and you can also get the generic error. So then you could do some error handling with some instance of, so to understand if it was a network error, generic error, etc. So the good thing about this is that you can use both approaches. And of course, for example, if you need the loading state, for example, in here, then it would be hard, right? Because you just get the unwrap just gets you the result or the exception, right? So you could not say that okay, now I'm in a loading state, but you could in theory also, or also in practice, you could say, okay, when I dispatch these, I'm in loading mode. So then your state could immediately update here in the app. So yeah, there's some do's and don'ts here, right? Some pros and cons, of course, on the two approaches. But for example, if you don't need to share the state in your Redux store for a next screen, for example, with the details, so maybe you can directly use it. So then you don't need to go through the Redux store and update everything and listen to the store. So there's also this way of using it, which I find in some cases might be useful for some kinds of requests. And of course, for some other types of requests, then you should use the whole flow on the Redux store. The good thing about this Redux toolkit that we are seeing in the previous video and also this video now is that it removes a lot of boilerplate and also gives you some nice additions to the way you can handle your requests. So for example, with these create async thunk, a lot of things, a lot of boilerplate is already taken care for you. So for example, the dispatch of the actions, the correct actions, and all of that is already done for you. So then in your slice, you just need to add the cases and then update the state and listen to the state with the selectors and update your app accordingly. But yeah, they also get you these for free. So then you can decide which one to use in which cases. And I think, for example, if you have just a call that doesn't need to change or to be saved as a Redux state to be used by multiple screens, then maybe you can just dispatch these on the screen that you need that information, and then you should be good. Otherwise, yeah, it's good to save it on the Redux store and go through the other flow. So it really depends on what you need. But it's nice to know both approaches here. And that's it, pretty much. So as promised, I want to explain you a little bit about Flipper. So Flipper is, as they mentioned, extensible mobile app debugger, and it works for both iOS and Android and React Native apps. So you can download for your specific OS. And pretty much what you can now see, for example, in here, is that we have network Redux debugger, React DevTools, logs, and all of that. So you need to enable them. They are in disabled mode or unavailable plugins or something like that. And here you can see your connected device. You don't need to do anything special to connect. So if you have Flipper installed, it will recognize your simulator, for example, and it will load everything. So let me now reload the app. And go to Flipper. So as I mentioned, I was throwing an error when we get 200 from the endpoint, and now you see the pending one. So this one was dispatched, and here you can see, which is really nice, the diff. So it was true, and now it's false after you do. Sorry, it was false, and now it's true. So if I see the state inside character, I see that we have character, and then inside you have characters, so the whole array, and then loading to true. So after the pending, we have loading to true. That's correct. That's what we are doing there. So after, you can see, and this is nice because you can see all of the actions being displayed and dispatched. So after that, we got a rejected because I'm throwing an error. So there I can see now an error, and we have the message and the type, which is also something that we are basically saving, and the loading is false and the characters are empty. So now I will allow the call to go in. So let me change that. So now taking a look, I restarted the app. So now I removed the exception, and now I'm just getting the results from the HTTP endpoint, and again we see the pending one. So in the character we have loading true, and then we go to the fulfilled one, and you see here all of the results that we got from the HTTP call, and also the loading to false, which is nice because now I can also take a look into network. And if I go to the network tab, then somewhere here we can see that there's these calls to these Rick and Morty API being done, and basically that's it. And you can always check these to see what are the results, for example. So for example, in this case, I know that the response will be there's this image there, because I'm loading the image from a URI, but this one is the one with the characters itself. So these ones are there for all the images that we load on the app. This one is the actual results. So where you can see a lot of stuff, because they send you a lot of stuff, but I just picked some of them. But yeah, you can take a look into these and inspect the response body, and also know from what's the request headers, what is the path that you are calling, and also I think we should also have here somewhere, well, with response, where is it? I'm not seeing the code. Response body. I would like to see the response status code. Oh, you see it here. Yeah, indeed. So you have the get, and then a 200 status, request size, response, blah blah blah. Probably you can even add more things here. Not sure, but yeah, this is pretty cool. And that's it pretty much. So for the network and the Redux debugger, these are really nice to haves for debugging purposes, and also to know what's the status of your app. Cool. So now you should be able to handle asynchronous calls, for example, an HTTP call, in your React Native app. We use Redux thunk to achieve that. Of course, there are other ways. Maybe we'll look at them in the future, but now you know at least one way. The good thing about Redux Toolkit is that it integrates already the Redux thunk, so you have it for free if you use Redux Toolkit. And of course, you get a lot of boilerplate reduced, because you don't need to create the fulfilled actions or rejected actions as we needed to do before. So now it's much more integrated, and you can also have the benefit of calling it directly and unwrapping the promises from the first dispatched action, which is also nice depending on the use case that you need Redux thunk for. Feel free to share your thoughts or questions in the comments down below. Till next time, keep in the loop.